Okay, so big T's for warrants in the previous video. What the heck is a warrant? Well, our reading lets us know that in compelling intellectual arguments and academic arguments, there must be a logical and persuasive connection between a claim and the reasons and data supporting it. In other words, what we all probably have intuited, that you need to have a claim and you need to give some evidence to support it. That's not the entire story. We also need to work to show the reader how our evidence supports our claim. That's what the warrant does, and we'll look at that in an example in just a few more moments, right? So I think if you're in this habit of saying, well, claim X is true because of support Y, you can also ask yourself, how exactly does the evidence or the reasoning or the data that I've provided here, how does that support my claim? That's what your reader will be asking. And what a warrant does is it often tells your reader very explicitly what your assumptions are about how your evidence supports your claim. So really what we're doing here is we're doing a lot of work for the reader. We're taking the reader very explicitly through our argumentation. So let's look at it in a very simple example. Hey, don't eat that mushroom. That's a claim. Our book uses this, right? What's our evidence? Why? How? What do we use to support this claim? Well, don't eat it because it's poisonous, right? Now, this is an enthymeme. This is what we'll call an informal argument. If somebody said to you, don't eat that mushroom because it's poisonous, that doesn't, just because this is informal, just because it's sort of incomplete, it doesn't mean it's not convincing. And in fact, we'll see why, in a moment, we'll see why these arguments can actually be more persuasive in certain situations. But as far as academic and intellectual conversation goes, we need more. Don't eat that mushroom because it's poisonous. And if we think about it, there is an unstated assumption here. What is the unstated assumption, or what is the warrant here that helps this? How does the fact that the mushroom's poisonous support the claim that someone shouldn't eat it? Warrants are often a little bit difficult for students to include because they seem so obvious often. Sometimes they seem so obvious that we just assume they shouldn't be included. Don't eat that mushroom. Evidence, good reasoning. Evidence, good reasons. Because it's poisonous. Warrant. Well, why does this piece of evidence support this claim? The warrant really puts all the cards on the table, lets us know it's because poisonous mushrooms are harmful to your health. So that's what it looks like to include a warrant. Sometimes we don't include them because it seems so obvious. Other times we don't include them because we're not entirely sure what the connection is for ourselves. And it's our job, especially in academic arguments, to explain to the reader fully why our evidence supports our claim. Also, we know we won't talk that much about backing here, but our argument is only as good. This little piece of reasoning here, claim, evidence, warrant, is only as good as the warrant, right? If your reader isn't convinced of your warrant, this whole argument doesn't work very well. So there's also a thing called backing, right? Which backing supports our warrant. Well, how do we know that poisonous mushrooms are harmful to your health? Well, the International Board of Mushrooms defines poisonous as deleterious or harmful to one's health. And of course, we can see how convoluted arguments become, because then this backing can kind of become like an claim in itself, and then we would have to say, the International Board of Mushrooms is an authoritative source on this, right? We'd have to maybe supply some more evidence and then another piece of backing to support this backing. Okay, that's going too far. I just want us to focus on including warrants, including our often unstated assumptions in our argument. That's really these three pieces here. I think just your teachers aren't going to ask, hey, where's your warrant? But if they're writing on your paper, say more about this. I don't understand. I know I'm going to be asking all kinds of annoying questions of your draft, and I'll probably say, can you be more explicit here? Why exactly shouldn't I eat a poisonous mushroom? And right, if it's, and it often the problem and ultimately the solution is we need to include warrants that show, that convincingly and logically show how the evidence we've provided actually does support our claim. Okay, in this brief video, I won't spend too much time on backing. Right, it's evidence that supports our warrants. Don't eat that mushroom because it's poisonous, and poisonous mushrooms are harmful to your health. Right, I need to maybe, in a different example, I would need to support this warrant. Okay, let's move on though. So this arguments that include and arguments that don't include warrants are the difference between implicit informal arguments, also called enthymemes, doesn't matter, and more explicit arguments. So famously, one of the most famous informal implicit arguments is this one: Socrates will die. Maybe you've heard this. That's the claim, because he is a man. Now, we have a claim and we have some evidence, some good reasoning. Is that enough to convince you? If someone said to you, hey, see Jim over there? Jim will die because he's a man. He will die at some point in his life because he's a man. Are you convinced by that? Absolutely, of course. We make these informal, implicit arguments all the time. And what happens is there is a backing here. It's just not supplied by us, the writer or the speaker. And so in some ways, these implicit or informal arguments can be really compelling, because if someone says to me, Socrates will die because he's a man, I do the math in my head. I connect the dots in my head and I say, he will die because he's a man, and I know that all men are mortal, so he will die, right? So we make these all the time. However, in academic writing, we often need to get into the habit of including that one little extra step, the warrant, right? What's our warrant here? Well, I already blew it for you, but right, it's this evidence supports this claim because we can all agree that all men are mortal, right? Informal, implied, implicit arguments, also called enthymemes. Many of us are in the habit of making these in everyday life and in our academic writing. What we want to get in the habit of doing is making explicit, formal arguments, right? Socrates will die because he's a man, and if I were trying to support this claim in an academic setting, then I would want to say, and all men die, right? That's the operative, this is the operative logical and persuasive connection between this evidence and this claim. I could include some backing as well, right? And I like that our book says backing can, we often think of argument as simply logical, but we can use logos, of course, right? In the history of man, no one has ever lived forever. We can also use ethos, or I could say, according to a study by the National Institute of Health conducted in 1997, all humans are mortal. We can even use pathos as backing sometimes, appeal to common emotions or common values. But again, I don't want to muddy the waters here too much with backing. What I want us to get in the habit of doing is taking that last step and explaining very clearly for the reader how our good reasons support our claim. And we need to do this in academic writing because we need to sort of hold the reader's hand and take them through we need to do a lot of work for the reader. Whenever I say something, you think often warrants are left out because we don't actually know ourselves how that evidence supports a claim. So if I write in my paper, building a border wall with Mexico will help make America safe, right? That's an informal argument, and the reader might read that and say, okay, well, I don't see how exactly it will. You seem to think that it will, but to convince me, I need more. I need more. I need you to show me how you think X supports Y. How exactly do you think a border wall will make America safer, right? And then right. Often that warrant is missing because the reader or the speaker themselves doesn't understand the connection. We have to do a lot of work, hold the reader's hand, walk them through our steps in academic reading so they are really clear on how, right, our evidence is in fact supporting our claim. And that's the work that warrants do. So if we want to finish, let's just see what it would look like to provide not only some evidence, but some warrants for this claim, this hunch that I have that I wanted to test out, that The Simpsons is the most influential comedy of the past 25 years. I will go with the facts evidence that I identified. Because a research paper at Stanford that analyzed allusions in the most popular comedies of the past 2 decades found that The Simpsons was referenced more than any other source. That might sound like I've supported my claim, but to an astute reader, they're going to be saying, okay, you think it's influential, and there was a study that shows that many comedies referenced it or alluded to it, but so what? Why does that piece of data, why does that study show that it's influential? So I would need to be sure to include this warrant. This study indeed supports the claim that The Simpsons is the most influential comedy of the past 25 years because range of influence directly positively corresponds with how many other comedies have referenced it and thus presumably been influenced by the show. In other words, if I make a fully explicit argument, I'm saying it's influential because there are a lot of allusions to it, and basically the definition of influential is that it is often alluded to. So it makes supporting even a somewhat simple claim. We have to be really thorough. Of course, I might need to provide some backing here and say, according to the American Institute of Comedy, the definition of influential is how many, right? I might need to even further support my argument. But I'm going to leave us with this, right? I think we need to move from making informal implied arguments in our writing. That mushroom is poisonous, so don't eat it. And we need to make sure we're connecting all the dots, being more explicit, more formal by including that warrant. That mushroom is poisonous, so don't eat it. Because since eating poisonous things is dangerous, we need to really fully show how the evidence or good reasons we've provided compellingly does support our thesis, or our claim, excuse me. Not enough to say, here's my claim, here's the evidence. We need that bridge between the two that says, here's my claim, here's my evidence, and my warrant shows how this evidence actually does support the claim, right? And we can get as formal or as explicit as we want. So hopefully this week, as we are drafting and revising our drafts, we can look at our own writing and ask ourselves, okay, how exactly does my evidence support my claim? What's my warrant here?